This is Between the Lines. Today, we dissect the road less traveled.
Hello, how are you? Back again with the road less traveled and chapter 27, the risk of confrontation. And I really didn't remember a single word from this chapter when I was reading. And it was really, really much deeper than I anticipated because I saw, oh, this is a short chapter, but actually it has many juicy things that we can take out from it. So let's start with confrontation. We have been talking about love, and in this case, love and confrontation, or love and conflict, we could say. So what is confrontation? Or rather, loving confrontation, right? Because we are talking also about love. And there are times when you have a certain problem, issue, or thing that you have to address to your partner, to your sibling, to your boss, to whoever is the other person in the relationship. And in this case, what you are basically saying, or in essence, what you're saying is, you are wrong and I am right, and you should be different, right? There's this way to say that, which is like kind of super upfront, and not many people can take it that way. So we are going to see how to make it more lovingly. But basically, it's the same. We are saying the same thing, but we are trying to make it about growth and not about that the other person, not focusing on the wrong part or the thing that we want to change, because it may not change, but we may get to an arrange between the two people, right? So that is what we are going to talk about. And most of the time, what we tend to do, or maybe you have had that experience with your partner, with your boss, with whoever you are thinking of, that by impulse say, you're doing this wrong, that's bad, no, don't do that, leave that, those kind of things. I sometimes do that. So what we do when we tend to do that, right? We generally act out of anger, annoyance, we act upon impulse. So we are saying, no, that's wrong. You're doing things wrong. That's not correct. You shouldn't do that. And it's like we criticize directly to the other person. And we are, in this case, assuming like a position of morally or intellectual higher ground. The other person is just there, and we are the ones saying, you are doing things wrong. Like we are like, the doctor mentions here, like playing God, right? We are playing God and saying, no, you are doing things bad, and I am the one who is the one setting the rules, or who is right about the situation. You should change. So you are like looking upon the other person. It could be like this difference of levels, right? And of course, this tends in general to go, unless the other person is super loving and really understands dynamics and maybe knows you, or knows you are angry or whatever, they can take it a little bit more lightly. But in general, what it tends to do is this kind of behavior gets you to distance from the other person, the one that's saying that you are wrong. And it's better if things are confronted in a different way, right? Especially because we are talking here about relationships that we want to grow and we want to nurture. So if that's the case, we need to find another ways. And what tends to happen during these conflicts? Well, generally, we have two ways to resolve the conflict, according to the doctor. He says we have one by being arrogant, by pure arrogance, and the other is by humility. And arrogance is like this position of I am right, you are wrong, you have to change this, you better change this, or else. Sometimes we say that. And of course, this absolutely no growth, as we said before, in this kind of relationships, and it creates a lot of resentment on the other person. And the other way is humility. And humility, we will say which cases are not humility, that sometimes is confused. Humility is about self-reflection, self-scrutiny, so the loving person, or the person who can really understand what's going on, and he or she tries to find better ways to communicate that problem, situation, or whatever it is that has to be solved, this conflict. So sometimes it doesn't come through impulse, but rather about reflection, saying, okay, I have to distance a little bit from this, and I have to think and really understand what's going on and how I can contribute for this to really be a successful relationship, right? And for it to grow, not only grow myself, but also the other person in the relationship and the relationship itself. And in this case, and so what happens here is that we have to level and also explain things in a language that the other person can understand us. And there are several ways. We will talk about the several ways that we can do this later. But I wanted to say something that we shouldn't confuse. Remember, I say humility, which should not be confused with meekness. Meekness is just submission, saying, "Okay, you're right," and we don't talk about the topic, and I hide in a cave, or I hide in my own past patterns, and I don't say anything about the topic, and so nothing is resolved in the end. And it's frequently even more destructive. This we have been taught, especially if you are from a certain religion, maybe you have been told to turn the other cheek, right? So you say, oh, I turn the other cheek, just hit me, and we forget about it. Metaphorically, of course, we are talking about this. Just say your thing, and I won't say anything, and it's just leave it at that. And while I was reading this, I remember that during this week we had to take our cat to the vet, and it's about 3 blocks from here. And when we walked out of the door, there was a couple with 2 children, apparently a married couple with 2 children, and the woman was telling the husband, telling out a lot of things. She was visibly, and we heard she was really angry with her husband, and she was telling, no, because this is my constructive criticism to you, but la 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 la. In the whole 3 blocks, she was not yelling, but almost with a high tone, telling his husband this and this and this, and he didn't speak at all. And he was he had his both children by hand, and he was walking in front of her, and she was like la 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 la, la saying things. And this is the kind of criticism that maybe won't help. I say maybe because I don't know them, but maybe don't help them grow as a couple. And so in this case, the husband was the one hiding and saying nothing, at least in that moment, right? And she was the one just criticizing and saying things. I'm not to judge, because we haven't been told how to deal with this kind of situation. Me, myself, for example, I used to just shut up and listen to what other people would say. And that is giving up on your power, your own power. That is just saying, okay, you can do whatever you want. I will hide. I will not take responsibility for my part to try to make this better. And yeah, that is the form of disempowering yourself, right? Just by turning the other cheek, as we said. So how can we do that? How can we confront or discuss with the other person without being a total jerk, basically? And there are a lot of works, and a lot of ways. The doctor says here, for example, that when we try to change the ways or change the course of the events that are happening in the situation, that is when we put ourselves in a leadership position. Because we should be leaders in that kind of way. And by applying leadership, we can maybe influence on the other part. And we have so many things and so many tools by which we can at least attempt to do that, right? We don't know how it will be resolved, but we can do that by example. We can do that by suggesting things. We can do that by telling stories. Storytelling is something that is has been on trend in the last years, or in other cases, for example, in religion, is through parables. We can question the other person. We can also put rewards or punishments. We can. There are so many different tools that we can use, depending on the situation, right? So yeah, this takes a lot of effort, especially as we're saying, in order for a relationship to grow, we need to think about this. We need to reflect on how we can address this problem or the issue at hand. And what happens? Remember that I mentioned that the doctor says we are playing God with the other person. Sometimes we're just doing this unconsciously, totally unconsciously, when we're saying you are wrong and I'm right, just plainly in that language. But when you try to address this from a humble perspective, you can develop here what we actually call the imposter syndrome. When you say, but who am I to say the other person maybe that they should change this, or who am I to say that they could have a different way of approaching the things that they're doing, or who am I to tell them or to decide for them, or who am I to play God, right? And I know maybe many of you don't believe in God, but just take it as an example, I would say, and please comment if you have another way of seeing this, setting God aside if you don't believe in God. So yeah, we are in this sense playing God, in the sense that we are putting ourselves on a moral or superior or more intellectual level than the other person, because we seem to know what's better for them, and that could be true, and sometimes it is not. But the way we are trying to communicate that to the other person should be the loving part, right? Because then it comes in the confrontation, it comes the other part telling us different things, and we still have to try to be loving in the way of discussing the thing, because we want to solve it, right? Unless you want to dissolve the relationship, most of the times we want for it to grow. And yeah, so We have the alternative again to do it lovingly, as we said before, with these different tools that I mentioned. And the other way is by not acting at all, in which, again, we are diminishing the self. That is not what we want. If you are really here, you don't want that. You just want to be on your own power of doing things, but not too much to overpower the other person. So you have to keep a balance again here. And the doctor mentions as a last paragraph, he says that this is exactly like you need balance, because it's like a paradox. Yes, I'm playing God by saying what the other person should do or should change, and at the same time I have to keep myself humble, and that is this balance that we really need. And so yes, I was reflecting on this, and especially about turning the other cheek. And the doctor mentions here a case of a minister or some kind of priest, and he had a wife and a daughter, and the daughter goes to therapy with the doctor, and she mentions that her mother used to even beat up his father, the priest, and he was super, according to the daughter, he was loving, he didn't say anything, he was submissive, and the wife was characterized as the bad guy, right? But actually the dynamic of both of them was the bad guy, because the relationship wasn't healthy. And so she had learned, this girl had learned to always turn the other cheek and just be submissive, this meekness that we mentioned, right? And that was not helping her at all. So she, through therapy, she could understand how to reverse that, how to know, not completely reverse, but know when to take her power, take her responsibility of the things that she could do in a relationship with her parents or other people, and not just turn the other cheek, but to know when to act and when to address and when to confront in a loving way, of course, but when to confront that kind of behaviors that she didn't really was in sync with, can say. So I really, really recommend this chapter. Well, at least for me, as I said, I had completely forgotten about this, and I found it super, super deep in this sense. So, well, I hope it has served you somehow, and please comment if you don't believe in God. For example, I know many people don't, or believe in other gods or whatever. How would you translate that for your own life, right? So yes, have a great week and see you next Sunday. Bye bye.
Stay tuned for Uluwa's next episode.